Hello, I'm Chris Boden. I'm the Senior Advisor with the Education Welfare and Safeguarding team at One Education. I'm here today to discuss the new Keeping Children Safe in Education updates. The new updates came into force on the 1st of September 2020. The consultation for the new document was suspended at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, but the DFE has seen fit to produce this document, albeit minus some of the proposals. The statutory guidance is applicable to all schools, academies and colleges, and it's the responsibility of the governing bodies, the management committees and the proprietors to ensure that all staff read at least part 1 of the guidance. This has always been the case with previous years. So why are these changes? They are to reflect the legislation. Particularly we've got new legislation coming in, the mandatory RHSE, which is the relationship, health and sexual education part of the curriculum that should be starting in September 2020, but I do believe that it will be fully implemented by spring 2021. Of course, we need to take into account all the government's updates around coronavirus, particularly their Safeguarding in Schools publication. The changes are also here to give us additional information to support the protection of children, and hopefully we can see more clarity in the guidance and how better we can understand and follow it. So what has exactly been updated? It now actually refers to a child's mental and physical health and development, and not just the physical health. There is, of course, a paragraph about coronavirus, and as I mentioned earlier, we do need to refer to the specific government guidance around this. There's more information around the child criminal exploitation and child sexual exploitation, preventing radicalisations, upskirting, the role of the DSL and safer recruitment. We will look at these a little bit closer in further slides. So, part 1, that's the safeguarding information for all staff. Every member of staff in your school, from your lunchtime assistants to your deputy heads, or your senior leaders and your head teacher, should read and understood this. How do you ensure that your staff have read and understood it? Some people have a tick box on a list in the staff room. Others have complicated survey monkeys and other electronic ways of making sure that their staff have actually read it. It's long been recognised that a child's mental health is much affected by abuse. The rewording to include mental and physical health is just, and I'm glad to see it's there. We've currently been working on a 7-minute briefing to help you further understand the mental and physical development of children. That will be available on our website. Child sexual exploitation and child criminal exploitation, serious youth violence, they are examples of extrafamilial harms, incidents or behaviours that can happen outside of school. More and more things are happening to young people and they're coming into school and telling us about it, but we don't always understand how and why these things are happening. So the more information we can be given, the better. It's been updated for all the contextual safeguarding, and more information is given to help us understand the different forms of abuse. Part 2 is the management of safeguarding. There is a link to the NSPCC's when to call the police. This is really useful and it tells you when you should call and what to expect from the police. Often we can call the police and think that's it, we don't have to do any more, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the police cannot act without further information. Sometimes the police still want us to play a role in safeguarding that child. So please look at this and other guidance that is available to help you fully understand what the police's role is and how you can work with them. The new safeguarding partners and child death review panels should now be in place. DSLs particularly should be aware of their new partnerships and should be following their local arrangements. We all understand what GDPR means, and it has been updated in this section to give further clarification about withholding information. We must remember that fears about sharing information must not be allowed to stop us from safeguarding a child. Adding the new data protection toolkit can only help us. Parts 3 and 4 My colleague Evette from our HR department will be offering a briefing to explain these in more detail because she's the expert in that field. Part 5, which is the child-on-child sex violence and sexual harassment section, there have been no changes. This was the new addition to the 2019 updates, which was the peer-on-peer info. In Annex A, there is further information. It sounds like there's a lot of information being given, but I do like the way it's been set out, and I do feel that it's a lot clearer for us to understand. And if you go to the different sections that I've mentioned across these slides, you can find the piece of information you want quite easily. Of course, it's looking at the child sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, county lines, domestic abuse, honour-based abuse. The honour-based abuse is now a term that is used instead of honour-based violence, and also preventing radicalisation and the upskirting. Upskirting is now a criminal act under the Sexual Offences Law. Annex B, it's about the role of the designated safeguarding lead. Very important role in school, and not one that is often chosen, but once it's taken on, I have met many DSLs that relish in doing that role to the absolute best of their ability, and hopefully I'm talking to a lot of you today. In this Annex B, there is added advice for DSLs on the needs of children with social workers, and it suggests actions that could be taken to promote their educational outcomes. In the proposals that were postponed at the start of the COVID epidemic, there were going to be given more responsibilities to DSLs to work with children who have social workers. For the time being, they have been exclusively left with looking at educational outcomes, but I'm sure that maybe next year we'll be looking at further responsibilities for the DSL around that role. As DSLs, you have huge responsibilities, and this should be explicit in your role and in your job description. The list of responsibilities is growing, and training is paramount. Prevent, early help strategies, statutory intervention. It's all things that we all need to be on top of. Availability has been an issue during the pandemic, and you should be aware of the COVID-19 guidance. I know that some schools over the past few months have been sharing DSLs where their own DSL was unavailable. This has worked quite well. I know local authorities have also been very supportive to DSLs across their boroughs. Annex C, online safety. Of course, we're all working more and more online, and we're asking children and young people to access online learning, but this again can raise more issues. We have to make sure that there are added links and systems are robust to secure the safety of our young people. Of course, learning online could develop even further. Colleges and universities are looking at expanding it even more, and maybe that'll come into our schools as well. The increased guidance in this section can only help us further. So what do we need to do? We need to update policies and not just put this year's date on them and leave them as they were for the last 5 years. You need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that you're using all the guidance given by the DfE, the corona pandemic updates, your online safety. They all need to be written into your policies. Your procedures are you following your policies. Make sure if it's written down that you do something in a certain way, that it is being done by your staff. And inform staff. Let staff see the policies, talk about them, have briefings about them. There's a lot of changes to be made. We all need to know exactly what our role is in that. And then don't just put it back on the shelf. Judge the impact. Keep it as part of your staff agendas. We've updated this, we've changed that, we've told everyone. Is it working? Is it having an impact? Is it keeping children safe? Those are the questions that you should be asking going further on now. If you need any help with any of this, just contact us here. We can offer bespoke training to your schools, DSL training, foundation training. We've got an advanced DSL training that has been asked for and is much anticipated, and the dates will be put out for that at the start of this autumn term. Any other safeguarding needs that you have, please get in touch. We like to share your good practice as well. So anything you want to discuss with us, we're here waiting to speak to you. I've been Chris. Thanks very much. It's nice to speak to you today. Please get in touch if there's anything we can do to help you safeguard your children and young people. Thank you.
Hi. As my colleague Chris explained, I work in the HR and people team. I have worked in education HR for 35 years, so I have a wealth of experience. I'm an accredited safe recruitment trainer, specialising in safeguarding and the single central record, and have developed a single central record training package and audit for schools. Chris has updated you with regards to the changes of clarification in parts 1, 2 and 5. As you're aware, we are in unprecedented times during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you have to be even more vigilant when carrying out safer recruitment practices and the statutory checks you are obliged to undertake for new and existing staff. A paragraph about the non-statutory interim guidance on safeguarding, which was put in place for the summer term, which was mainly about documents for the DBS process, is now been withdrawn and your usual practice should continue. However, you should consider including in your processes contingency arrangements should COVID-19 impact on schools further. It is vital that your safer recruitment and safeguarding processes remain very much top of your agendas and that you have clear processes in place. Part 3 of the Keeping Children Safe in Education document sets out those requirements. So, there are no changes to Part 3 of the guidance. However, as with Part 1 of the document, it is good practice to read Part 3 of the document at the start of the new academic year to refresh yourself of the guidance and review your school practices. This is to ensure that you remain compliant and reflect any changes in school personnel. Safer recruitment is not just a tick box exercise, and safeguarding should be built into every stage of your recruitment process. As a reminder, I've set out the basics of the process in the next few slides. And remember, as we are involved in safer recruitment, there's support that we can offer. So whilst the Keeping Children Safe guidance does not refer to a specific recruitment process, it is a requirement for at least one member of an interview panel to be safer recruitment trained. This training provides clarity of the process to follow, starting with the advert through to a recruitment decision. It's imperative that your recruitment processes are clear and transparent. One Education have a number of safer recruitment accredited trainers and run safer recruitment training on a termly basis, with the next accredited training event taking place on the 13th of October 2020. The training can also be provided to small cluster groups and governors, either in full days or 2 twilight sessions. So I urge you to book on the training to ensure your school is compliant with the initial stages of the recruitment process. It is wise to have a number of individuals who are safe recruitment trained to ensure your recruitment panels are compliant. So, you must ensure at the start of any recruitment exercise that you have an appropriate advert, job description and person specification in place, which clearly set out the requirements and expectations of the role. It is important to make clear the requirement for the post to be DBS checked at enhanced level. This is your first step in deterring unsuitable applicants from even applying for a role in your school. It is recommended that you have a safe recruitment policy with clear written guidance. And One Education have developed a safe recruitment policy which is available and we can support your school in developing your own recruitment processes. Once you've made your recruitment decision and you have made a conditional offer of employment to a candidate, you will need to consider all your pre-employment checks and the SCR. There are no changes to this process in the new Keeping Children Safe. It is a requirement for you to maintain a single central record for your establishment and to record your statutory checks that you've undertaken. One Education have developed a best practice single central record process and can support you with information to be recorded. We also have a single central record audit of your practices and can produce a report for your governing body and support you with any training needs. We are also running a single central record management and myth busting breakfast briefing on the 16th of September. So please book on the briefing to ensure you are compliant with your processes. All necessary information must be stored in one local central location. However, you choose to store the information in line with requirements for keeping children safe. You must ensure that the information is stored securely, either password protected or in a lockable drawer. There are, however, statutory minimum pre-employment requirements to satisfy safe recruitment and set out in Keeping Children Safe Part 3, which must be recorded and evidenced on the single central record. So, further clarity has been provided for risk assessments, and you must ensure that you assess the suitability of a volunteer in your school. This is to ensure that they do not undertake regulated activity and are not unsupervised. This assessment will determine whether you will obtain an enhanced DBS check, but must not include a barred list check. See Annex F of the guidance for further guidance regarding risk assessment for individuals who have access to children. Again, this is something that we can support you with. And then moving on to Part 4. There is a significant change to Part 4 in that it's been made exceptionally clear in paragraph 56 that any allegations of abuse are to include supply staff, volunteers and contractors. This clarity is welcomed as it was almost a grey area where the responsibility lay for those individuals. Schools have to ensure that all staff are aware of the processes to follow should they have any concerns regarding individuals who may pose a risk of harm to a child. So, duty as an employer and employee. The guidance has set out the school's obligations regarding an individual who may pose a risk of harm to a child should they continue to work with children. It is the school's responsibility to ensure they carry out a full and fair investigation into the allegations. The guidance refers to transferable risk, and this is where a member of staff or volunteer supply teacher is involved in an incident outside of school which did not involve children but could have an impact on their suitability to work with children. For example, a member of staff is involved in a domestic violence situation at home. No children were involved, but your school needs to consider what triggered these actions and could a child in the school trigger the same reaction and therefore being put at risk. So, the school's responsibility where an individual is not an employee. So the guidance has set out schools' obligations regarding their responsibility to ensure they carry out a full and fair investigation for those who are not directly employed by the school. For example, a supply teacher. The school are required to liaise with the supply agency or contractor and fully engage them in the investigation process should the nature of the allegation have occurred in school and therefore access to witnesses, etc. Again, you need to engage with those agencies regarding whether an individual should remain employed in the school or whether they should be suspended from duties. So, your actions to consider. Ensure relevant staff are familiar with Part 3 of Keeping Children Safe in Education and review your procedures. Review and amend your safeguarding policies and safer recruitment procedures in line with Keeping Children Safe guidelines. Emphasise the importance of staff taking responsibility for the wider context of safeguarding and to follow procedures for reporting allegations of abuse. Ensure all your staff are appropriately trained and receive support and supervision. All staff need to be aware of any amendments to the school safeguarding policy, and all staff need to be aware of the requirement to obtain documents and verifications for the single central record, and it is maintained daily. In addition, ensure that governors have a wide understanding of the requirement for the checks. So I would recommend that we have provide lots of training for you. So if you want to contact HR and people on the telephone number on the screen, we can offer single central record audits, information about GDPR, safe recruitment training, bespoke training of all kinds, and just be mindful that we are running also reducing and managing allegations against staff training on the 2nd of October 2020. Thank you.